Hello everyone, and thanks for coming back to the channel. When we build quads, we go by the numbers, the specs, the stuff that we find on all the different websites about the different components that we have, thrust tests, weights, measurements, all these different little things, and then we put them together and we hope we get the flight performance and characteristics that we want. And in this particular case, in the thumbnail that you've seen already, I did break this quad, but stick with me here for a minute because this one is one of those where I got it and I looked at it and I thought, oh, this isn't going to be any fun. I should have said no. But I'm pleasantly surprised, and I'm here to tell you today, this one, don't sleep on it. The flight controller and ESC all in one board is an HBFPV AF412. The ESCs are 12 amp rated for a 13 amp burst of 3 seconds. It's running these 1103B 7000 kV motors, running HQ 65mm T-style props. The VTX is the FD VTX Micro, kind of nondescript naming there. It is power switchable from 25 milliwatts all the way up to 400 milliwatts. Runcam Nano 2 FPV camera. This is the original canopy. It took 2 pretty hard crashes to make it into all these bits. We get a super small screwdriver, a pretty hardy prop remover, 3 nylon standoffs in case you wanted to remove the metal ones. I would never suggest that. And 4 pieces of my favorite tape. And it all comes in a box, and it still fits with that big canopy on it. With the Beta FPV canopy on it, it weighs almost 61 grams. For 3S flights, I used this GNB 520 milliamp battery, which brings our flight weight up to 103.5 grams. For the 4S flights, I used this GNB 450 battery, which brings our flight weight up to just over 113 grams. The double arms are 4 millimeters thick. At their thinnest, they look like they're about 5 millimeters wide. The rest of the carbon is 2 millimeters thick. Motor post to motor post, I'm getting over 105 millimeters. As you can see there, we're starting off with a 3S flight. And this is going to be a pretty long flight, so grab a cup of coffee if you need it. I should also note that I am running on the 25 milliwatt setting for the VTX. So in the 4S flight, which will be coming up directly after this, we'll get to compare between 200 milliwatts, which is what I ran it afterwards. I rarely see the need to actually run 400 milliwatts. I'm not going far, but you'll get to compare the 2 different flights as well as the video reception, although I'm not really testing that, but you can take a look and see what you see from that. So this flight, as I said, is going to be really long, over 4 minutes. I am flying on a 3S 520 milliamp GNB battery, my favorite batteries. I fly them almost exclusively, but I still have a host of other batteries that I do use. And I'm probably going to run out of things to say, but I don't want to leave you bored. So I'll talk about a few of the things that we'll be covering in this video up close and personal, because I think there's some things you want to see. I think this is really, really good. I know the canopy broke. I smoked it into a tree, took a little crack out of it. We'll look at that video. And in the second crash, I just locked up. As a pilot, I forgot what I was doing. I went somewhere else. I don't know. Pilot error, call it what you will. And it's going to be ridiculous because I don't take any evasive action. I just kind of decide to let it fall into the tree and then tumble out of the tree and hit the ground. And so it fell from over the house, punch out, tumbled through that tree and hit the ground. And then the canopy in the VTX, well, the canopy exploded. The camera, of course, because it's held on by the VTX, came apart. One wire did get separated from the board that it was on, and that is the 5-volt wire. It just kind of jerked it right off the VTX, but it didn't pull the pad off, so I guess that's a good thing for speaking for the pad on that VTX. I just trimmed it up, tinned it up, and soldered it back on and went out and flew it some more. Matter of fact, the 4S flight you're going to see is well after I had actually crashed and obliterated that canopy. Also, it has, I should have mentioned it already, but the carbon on the arms, those are separate pieces. Those aren't glued together in any way, and they don't run the full length. So they're secured inside the flight stack, which isn't terribly unusual. We're kind of interlocking them now, but at one point in time, we were kind of securing them with the flight stack on bigger quads. Mainly 3 inchers, and you would see it on 5 inchers as well when they were doing that. But it's something to keep in mind that those arms aren't truly that thick. And that was one of the things that when I saw it, I was like, oh boy, I didn't like the material the canopy was made out of. I thought, oh, this is going to break on the first crash. Surprisingly, it did not break on the first crash. And then I really wasn't kind of over the moon with having 1103 motors at 7,000 kV. I just thought, there's nothing special about this. This probably isn't going to be very good. But as I said, I'm thankful that sometimes you get a happy surprise, and this is one of them, in my opinion. Of course, make your judgment for yourself. Don't let me convince you this is something you need to have. But I think on 3S, it's a very smooth flyer. It's not very aggressive, but the PID tune that it came with, and I am flying it with that PID tune that it came with, and I'm running it on the stock props, the bi-blade 65mm props. very under control, very good tune, doesn't have a lot of prop wash issues when you're flying it and managing the throttle appropriately. It's got good punch over the house. It's just, there's really nothing to really complain about, except for if you're a speed demon, and that's where 4S comes in. I was also skeptical about 4S performance and that being something I'd like. I thought the extra cell, the weight of that battery down there, you can feel it, but the performance is actually offset. So it's not as though you're just running 4-cell for the sakes of being able to tell your buddies you're running a 4S battery on your micro. It actually provides more performance. So it does actually perform. So it's something that I was a little bit surprised about when I was looking at the specs and before I started flying this one. And as you can see, our low voltage warning comes on quite a bit, and I ride that out. I should just probably change those things, but I don't want anybody to be confused. You really should let your batteries recover. When you disarm, your battery should come back to 3.5 volts or greater when you disarm, and I always go back to that. So if you know how far down you can go, you can run longer. And you see in this case, I ran 4 minutes and 16 seconds, and my batteries are going to come back to well over 3.5 volts per cell. So could have even run pretty longer, and I wasn't necessarily being easy on it by any stretch. Typically, when I fly the way I normally want to fly with a micro, 2.5 minutes is good. Anything near 3 minutes is outstanding. That's 4 minutes. So that's kind of ridiculous. But let's get started, and we'll look at the 4S flight. So a little bit of breeze on this day, but thankfully we got lots of sun, so it's not all dreary to look at anymore. And one other thing that I thought was kind of interesting when they put the craft name up there, the FF65, how they used, I think that's the equal sign that they used up there. Oh yeah, I did that punch out over the house and just got out of control, but I decided to show it to you anyways because I'm going to show you the one where I didn't take corrective action and I just smoked the thing. So you could probably hear it right away. You can really hear how quickly the props spin up and get to top speed, and that's where that performance comes from that extra cell. And I spent, I don't know, 25 packs on 4S, 450, again, G&B batteries, and because one of my concerns about something like this is that, fine, it flies well on 3S, but if we're going to be pushing it on 4S, are we going to be burning out a motor? Are we going to be burning out an ESC? And I want to be relatively certain that you wouldn't experience that. So I ran quite a few packs. I actually had some pretty good days of flying too, even when it was cold. Like this day, I'm wearing a jacket, but I'm not like bundled up, but we have the sun. I should also mention that on the product page that they suggest running the GemFan 2540 props on 3S. So if you choose to add some performance on 3S and give up some flight time, the GemFan 2540 props, although the props that I really like, I thought it flew really well for, you know, the bi-blades. I would just stick with the bi-blades, but there's personal preference in there, but you don't get any of the 2540 GemFan props in the kit, so you either have to have them on hand or you have to buy them separately. Something I should have noted during the 3S flight was that they recommend either the bi-blades or the GemFan 2540s, and on 4S, just the bi-blades. So 4S, just the props that it comes with. You'll have a good time. I'm just really surprised by this. I didn't expect it to perform this well, and I'm happy to report that this company, HBFPV, whoever they are, I don't know how long they've been around, but in my opinion, I think they found a winner here. No, I don't like their canopy or the plastic that was used, but when something performs well, I'll sacrifice other things as long as it doesn't affect the performance. And in this case, the canopy, I pulled one of the $6 or $5, whatever, Beta FPV canopies, made the holes a little bit bigger so I could mount it up with my soldering iron. I just kind of poked them through, and I went out and flew it, and it mounts up good. We get good solid image on the camera. There's no bobbling around. And as you can see here, we are still going to get over 2.5 minutes, hitting it pretty dang hard on 4S. So again, for me, in my flight style, that's pretty dang good. So this is the first kind of major impact that it took. In this particular case, it actually didn't impact the integrity of the canopy. It still held everything in place, but a chip of it did come out. And there you see it, just wanged it right off the tree. It's just like I was aiming for the tree. Great target practice there. So again, just kind of cruising around the backyard, kind of hitting it kind of hard. Going to do a little power loop over here. I get my angle off, and I just decided, yeah, let's just go ahead and get the tree. And then I tumble out of the tree. We see the system restart. Now we see that we don't have a camera. That's because the camera's not getting any power. It pulled the 5-volt wire right off the VTX. And here's a picture of how that looked after bringing it inside. It really didn't take me long to repair it. You can see that the receiver also disconnected, but that's not hardwired together. That was just a connector. But you could probably see the red wire to the camera, the 5-volt line, that pulled off that pad, and it's just laying down there by that arm. Like I said, I was fortunate enough to where I had one of these Beta FPV canopies. It lined right up with the holes, of course. Made them a little bit bigger so I could get a couple of MT screws in there. Used a zip tie for my antenna, and off I went back to fly. So my first crash kind of broke a section out right about here of the camera, and then the next one just kind of blew the whole thing apart. But as you can see, as you've looked at it, I fixed it right up and it works just fine. Now, I may have thrown the weights off a little bit because I can't possibly reassemble that, give you a true weight of how it comes stock, but this will give you an idea. I did leave this rear post on just to try to make that weight a little bit truer. Also, I do have some damage around back here. If you didn't notice, some of that material did pop out. This isn't really, in my opinion, necessary. It makes it a little bit easier on the eyes, I think, because you can see through there. It doesn't really hold any wires in. There's actually, you know, it's got a traditional diamond-shaped whoop board in there, and then it's got a square VTX in there. So there's a little adapter plate in there. This might be part of the structure, though, for right here. I don't remember looking at that very closely. Hopefully that picture that I showed you can go back to that and look. Yeah, if I could get some good light down in there. It's not part of the structure, at least not on this side. See, I moved that out of the way. So it's just got a traditional stack in there. So this plastic bit around the outside, it shouldn't be part of the structure. And my camera, you know, it was holding things nice and steady. I wasn't getting any bobble, any jello. We've covered the carbon fiber arms and how they're not attached. You can actually see the line of delineation through there. I did unscrew the motor and pull them apart. I think I took a picture of that. If not, I can take another picture afterwards and I'll show that to you as well. 3 screws on the motors. And then we have some recess screws here and here and here and here. And then we have some button head screws over here on the side. I approve. They're all hex headed. I wish these were not so predominant, because that's why I use this battery pad. I use kind of a thicker battery pad because those button head screws right down here, I didn't, you know, on micros, when we have these batteries below, I don't want them pounding into my batteries. I don't want them denting and denting and denting my batteries up. It is a little bit awkward, this little point out here. What's that little guy for? What are we going to mount to that? Well, the canopy, but the canopy that they shipped it with, maybe it was redesigned and the first one had this. They just thought, we'll just use the same carbon cut. Also, the hole I used in the back, that wasn't used for anything. Again, spare screw hole, but it came in handy for putting my VTX antenna through it and just keep things out of harm's way. Of course, I just used my soldering iron again. I put some a hole in the plastic, pulled my antenna wire through, had it just out like this. I could do something a lot more pretty or handy, but these AC900 receivers seem to work pretty dang good. I'm really surprised by them for something that does Futaba as well as FrSky. But I've used 5 or 6 of them here in the last 5 or 6 months, something like that, and they've worked just fine. So if you're looking for an FrSky or a Futaba receiver, you might look at the AC900. They have a version that is diversity, but it's a lot bigger. But if you're wanting range and you're wanting to try one out, I'll see if I can find it, and then I'll print it on screen here, and I'll put a link down in the video description to that particular receiver if you just want to try those out. Also, out here on the edges, see we have more holes that match up. It's really strange that you find this sort of stuff where you just have random holes. Now, I know in the Larva X HD that it was supposed to come with standoffs to where the hoops would mount into that arm. So those of you that saw that video and was like, oh, he's pointing out random holes again, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, yeah, sometimes I don't know what I'm talking about, but I try to just bring it up. I try not to say something where I don't know. I don't try to act smart or talk smart. I just try to bring things up. So this, it seems just a little bit unique. To call it that all the way around. You don't, if you didn't have this middle section piece, I don't think you would necessarily need to put the arms down. You can see that I didn't. That's one of my favorite things to do, but I had so much fun flying this, I really didn't care. The arms, the motor wires go through there and then go down into these connectors, so if you need to replace a motor. And I was really surprised that these weren't a much greater bottleneck. You know, I have thought for the longest time with these little crimped on pins that if you're trying to pump 4S through it, that it's going to become a really good bottleneck and really kill your battery. But I flew for over 2.5 minutes on 4S. I don't know. I don't understand this, but I guess I'm just sharing at this point, aren't I? I got my little flashlight out here, and hopefully you'll be able to see how that arm does come into that center section and then it bolts to the It's not necessarily the flight controller itself, but it has a bolt that runs through there. Let's see. Can I see it through here? So obviously it doesn't go all the way through because that flight controller covers that. So you've got a screw at the head on the top of that. So it's held together by the bottom plate, the second set of arms. Hopefully you can see that. See that little nut on top between the wires right there? That's the nut to the arms, so they're secured together at the motor side and then on the body side with that nut on each arm. I did secure down the battery lead, and it did come with this capacitor on it here. I didn't mention that in the quick roll. Let's see if I can see through that heat shrink. It looks like a 16 volt 100 microfarad capacitor, so that's fair size for micro. I think on 4S I'd like to see 20 volts, but you know, 16 will be fine. You know, I'm not familiar with this company, but they came out with a micro and they've got a really good camera in here. They're not going back to the cheap, you know, 16:9 Caddx EOS 2 cameras. We've seen that a few times from companies. At least to me, that feels like somebody who's going cheap. They went to Caddx, they asked them for the, not in this case, in other cases, they went to Caddx, asked them for the cheapest camera. They got a bunch of the 16:9s, which for those of us that run 4.3 goggles, it looks, you know, squashed, doesn't look right. They went to Runcam, got the Runcam Nano 2, which, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a good move. It's a camera I like. Are there better cameras on the market? Yeah, you could get one of the $34 cameras, but this thing is just running a little bit over $100. So having a Runcam Nano 2, a 400 milliwatt VTX, you can run 3S. Well, you can actually run 2S, 3S, and 4S on this. The one downside to this thing is that the canopy is going to break. I would trust that. I know that is going to break on you eventually. It's not going to take the hard whacks that I gave it. It's going to happen whether you know, just tumble. Somebody's going to tumble just perfectly and it's going to break the canopy. So your canopy is going to get broken. Plan from day one, if you buy one of these, to get a different canopy. I can tell you that this one fits and works out just fine. You do have to finagle the You do have to finagle the wires underneath to make sure that the camera connector to the VTX doesn't get in your way, because if it's laying on top of the VTX, you can't get the canopy all the way down. So you have to kind of squirrel that away in this front little nose section as you're putting your canopy on. No, but a really good, surprising micro. I am pretty stoked about this one. And stoked isn't a word I say much. Looks like the price point comes in anywhere from $110 to $120. Looks like the price point varies depending upon whether you get a receiver or not. And they've got all sorts of receiver selections over there. They seem to have everything covered. DSM-X, FlySky, Futaba, FR Sky, EU, non-EU, so the price comes in between $110 and $120. I will attempt to get a coupon code, and I will put that down in the video description next to the link to the product. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in that comment section below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.